Hello, welcome to the first episode of the podcast. I actually tried filming one already, but that didn't go so well. So on my first podcast, we have Chris Brannigan. Hello, Chris.
Hey, Josh.
I'm your host, Josh Garman. If you didn't know already, Chris is joining me. Chris is a big inspiration for me, and actually the guy that inspired me to do my ET cycle. I'm trying the best way to explain it. I mean, he's kind of known for his walk. Do you want to tell people a little bit more about the walk?
Yeah, so if people have seen me, they will have probably picked me up when I did a charity event in the summer just gone, between July and August of 2020. I walked 700 miles across the UK, wearing 25 kilos of kit on my back. And I did that starting at Land's End. I went to London and then up from there to Edinburgh. And I did that whole journey barefoot. And I did that to raise money for a charity that I started at the start of last year called Hope for Hasti. And the aim of the charity really is to raise money to create a gene therapy for a rare condition that my little girl has.
So I think this is the thing, and obviously we've talked about it since, and I learned more and more about the charity as time went on. But what interests me, I suppose, from the adventure side, is how you came up with the idea and sort of how you took it from nothing. And I know that when you began, you didn't know what you're doing, but actually being able to get the attention and getting the help that you needed.
I think when people hear the word charity, they imagine that we have staff and an office and administrators and lots of help. And we are a charity in the sense that we're registered with the Charity Commission, but really what I'm talking about is just myself and my wife. And we do everything between the two of us while also both holding down full-time jobs and looking after three kids. And when we started the charity back in March of 2020, we were doing some fundraising, but lockdown really sort of took the wind out of our sails. We couldn't raise any money. And our fundraising target is, of course, ultimately £2.5 million. And we knew that as soon as lockdown ended, we were going to have to do something really big to try and sort of capture people's imagination and get them talking about the charity and hopefully donating. And so we started off with this idea that I'd walk across the country, something iconic, Land's End, John O'Groats. But we knew that that just wouldn't be enough, really. It would have to be more. So I added in the weight and I said, I'll carry 25 kilos. I'll do what we call in the army a tab. I'll tab it, basically march quickly across the country. But we again just thought, we don't know if that's going to be big enough to really sort of grab people. And I think I had a Jerry Maguire-esque moment of insanity, a slice of bad pizza. And I just said to my wife while we were sat in bed one night, I said, why don't I do it barefoot? And she just said, what? No one can actually even do that. And I sort of realized that that was the reaction we needed. We needed people to say, hold on, that's not real, is it? And then do a second look and then hopefully want to tag along for the rest of the journey.
Well, I guess barefoot is something to catch people's attention. I think that's the thing about it. As you go along, you see someone barefoot, and you go, "Oh, God, what did I just see?" It's a it's a mad idea. And then, how did you go from there to sort of the beginning? How long was it before you were ready to set off and try and attempt it?
I don't know, actually. So the timeline is really ragged because we knew for a long time that whole lockdown one went on forever. If you remember, from I think March until July, pretty much we couldn't do anything, and we knew we had to do something big. But really, sort of from sort of having that idea and actually setting off was really short. Probably as little as about 2 weeks. We had different ideas before that, which we had part developed, and then we thought no, and we abandoned them. And part of the problem I had was I just procrastinated a lot. We were talking about thrusting myself into the public limelight and, sort of saying, this is me, I'm trying to raise this money. And I find that quite daunting. I'm a fairly private person. I'm certainly not an extrovert. So I think I procrastinated on the planning for a long time. But ultimately what we ended up with was like a little whiteboard. We have a whiteboard in the house that we use for the kids, schooling. And we just wrote down a whole bunch of like words and things that we knew we wanted to achieve, stuff we had to do. And that was our plan. And as soon as we got the date, And Boris, I think, said on the Friday, lockdown's going to end on Monday, July the 6th. I just bought a train ticket. I packed my bag, no shoes, obviously, and just went to Land's End and started walking with a hope and a dream that we could raise some money.
Well, I think it's amazing how these things kind of unfold you without the planning. Because, like you said, I think you told me once that you only had like two friends on Facebook before you set off.
I had exactly 6 friends on Facebook.
And that was it. And then and then suddenly they started rolling in. So you set off. I mean, obviously you set on this train and you're ready to begin your journey. I mean, once you set off, what was the plan then? Did you kind of figure things out as you went, or were you trying to push it out as much as you could, or did people sort of just gradually it snowballed?
So it snowballed, and we did have something that looked a bit like a plan. So I made an intro video on the very first morning, which we shot out on Facebook, and I think that got us some initial traction, and we I updated my route every day. So on Facebook, the night before, I'd say, right, tomorrow I'm going from Plymouth to Postbridge or wherever I was going. So people knew the route I was walking and what roads I'd be on. And I had some leaflets with me. So when I met people, I could give them a leaflet. So if they couldn't make a donation, they could see a bit about the charity and go to the website and stuff like that. But I think what really made it take off was that people would see me in the street or maybe heard me on the radio and go, "Holy Jesus, this guy's actually walking barefoot." I don't think lots of people believed it until they really saw it. And then we'd just take like a selfie and they'd post it on their social media. And, that might hit 50 people or 250 people. But I was meeting, even in those very early days, I was meeting 100 people a day, so that gives you a reach of, thousands. And then it only grew in scale from there.
Well, I think it's an amazing thing. It's not like that symbolism of resilience. Really, you're sort of like trudging on, and people gradually came and joined you, didn't they?
Yeah, they did so. And that was the idea. When we published the sort of route the night before, we hoped that people would want to show up and take part and come along. But never in my wildest dreams did I think it was going to take off as much as it did. There'd be mornings where I'd show up and there might be 200 people, stood around, waiting just to say, "Yay, keep going." And, there were other days where I walked with 4 or 5 people, but almost every day I met hundreds and hundreds of people, and some would walk with me for 5 minutes or just pat me in the back as I went past. So the momentum was really unexpected, but just incredible. People were so supportive everywhere I went. They sort of anticipated me. They waited outside their houses, so they could put a fiver in the bucket that I was carrying, or they joined me for a leg. It was great.
Well, so I know obviously you're doing this because you have to. I mean, you didn't want to come to this decision to do something, but is there takeaways? I mean, did you? I mean, obviously you're going through a lot of pain at the time, but in terms of like the interactions with people and the kindness you received, has that sort of left an impact on you now?
It absolutely has. I think my viewpoint isn't vastly different from most people's viewpoint. I sort of feel like I'm going through life alone, or that's what I felt like. And you make the life for yourself, and you push through as best you can. But it really opened my eyes as I was walking to how kind people are, because all the way through, all we asked we didn't really ask anybody for anything. We just told our story, and we said we've got a little girl with a rare disease, and it's a condition that has no treatment options and only affects a really small number of kids. So unless we create a treatment and we raise this money, it's just never going to happen for her. And the upwelling of kindness and compassion from people all over the country was just incredible. And sometimes it was big things. I met a guy in Cobham, in fact, Chobham, near London, and he had driven from Bristol. So he probably had driven for 3 hours to meet me at the side of the road, and he gave me £1,000 check, which was absolutely incredible. And to smaller things like, people passing me on the road and saying, "What are you doing?" And I'd explain what I was doing. And then they'd come back 30 minutes later on a hot day with cold drinks and ice lollies. And, people were giving up time left, right, and center just to help someone that they could see was struggling and in pain and more generally in distress because of their family circumstance. So I think it's left me with a sense that people are genuinely kind, and everybody, almost to a man or woman, will try and help if you're really in trouble.
Well, I think it's interesting. It's something I've only got to experience on a small scale, but just being on the road and getting those interactions with people is quite amazing. And obviously, I presume you meet people with similar stories. You meet other families that are going through a similar situation with their children as well.
Yeah, lots. I think the first one of those kinds of interactions I had was on my fourth day of 35. I met a guy called Mike and his wife, Nicola, and their little boy. And they just jumped out of the car, and said, Chris, we wanted to come and talk to you because we had a little 8 year old who we lost to a rare condition, and we just wanted to say you need to keep going and thanks for what you're doing. And we met loads of families like that who were in the same boat, albeit with different conditions. They had kids who were suffering, who couldn't get access to treatments or appropriate medical care, or the circumstance was worse than ours in some ways, in that there was a treatment, but it was only available in America, and costs $1 million a year to give to their child. So it must be terrible to know your child has a condition that's treatable and there is a treatment, but you just can't access it with your income and where you currently live. So, yeah, we came across lots of really sad stories that were quite similar to ours, lots of families who are really struggling.
So before we sort of move on to where things are going now and sort of what's next, I'm just intrigued to hear a few stories, like some of your low points, maybe some of your high points, and those interactions that really made it for you during your trip.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what really made the trip for me were some of the people that I met, and I met some incredible personalities along the way. I met a great guy called Jake Dean, who came to join me as I was sort of moving in towards London. So it was about 2 weeks in at this point, and I was really, really in a bad place physically. I'd lost loads of weight because when I started the challenge, it just wasn't fit enough to do 20, 25 miles a day carrying all that weight. And my feet were really in ribbons. I had infections, I had open wounds on them. And Jake had taken 3 days off work to come and walk with me, which I just thought was absolutely incredible. And as miserable as I was feeling, he was so good because he's in the army. He's a trained sort of physical trainer. He's a PTI, and I think he knew all the things that I needed to hear to keep me going. So when I was thinking, God, I really want to stop, he could sense it. So he was always there. He was always pointing out the nice piece of road. He said, Chris, look how flat that road is. That's probably a 9 out of 10. What do you think? Or if I felt like stopping, he would let me stop, but he'd say, right, you've got 2 minutes. I'm timing you, you know. So he wouldn't let me stop for too long. And he was just incredible. He pulled me through. And on the morning I had to go to London, I thought, there's no way I can even make it out of the house, never mind to London or the end of the road. But he did a great job of motivating me that day. And it just highlighted to me the difference it can make to have good people around you. When you feel like you can't do it, good people will always give you the motivation you need to keep going on.
So yeah, it's interesting actually. Where that motivation and resilience come from. It's obviously you have that strong personal reason to do it. But how did your day to day look? Like obviously you're waking up, your feet are probably feeling awful. How did you sort of get up and start moving for the day?
It was funny because before I started, I thought I'll start every morning at about 8 and I'll be finished by lunchtime. And it turned out that every day took about 10 hours, maybe 12 if it was a long day, because it was just so hot and I was meeting so many people along the way. But my day typically started at 6. I'd wake up. I had to quickly eat and sort of have a shave or whatever I was doing, and then look after my feet. So every morning I spent 30 or 40 minutes, massaging my feet, trying to get the blood flow going because I think after like the second day, they swole up massively. I got tendonitis in both my feet. It was just really, really painful. So when I got out of bed in the mornings, I'd be like, oh my God, just walking around like I'm walking on a bed of nails. and it would take about an hour of just sort of slowly moving around to get my feet to sort of get used to walking, and then I would just walk all day, but punctuated by stopping to chat to people and having little breaks to eat and sort of rehydrate and stuff like that. And then usually finish somewhere between sort of 4 and 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And then it was just a question of eating as many calories as possible. I don't think I've ever eaten so much in my whole life as I did during that month, because I was just burning so much energy during the day. And then trying to get to sleep by no later than 10 so I could get a full 8 hours rest. But what was funny for me was I found that the whole experience, because my body wasn't ready and it was so painful, I was really stressed a lot of the time. So I wasn't finding it very easy to sleep. I was waking up 2, 3 times in the night, sort of in anticipation of the next day. So I'd be sweating and, panicking about how much pain I was going to be in the next day and how difficult the road was going to be. So the whole thing was fairly stressful, but uh, I suppose it wouldn't be a challenge unless it was difficult.
Well, I think it's more mental than physical. I suppose. I guess it's that knowledge that you've got to get up and get back on your feet again. So how many days is it in total?
So I walked for a total of 35 days, and I had 2 days in the middle where I just took a rest because my feet needed to heal while I was in London. As I said, I had infections in both my feet, so I had to take antibiotics to try and clear that up. Um, and during those 2 days, I didn't walk at all. I just crawled around the place where I was staying. So if I needed to get a glass of water or a bite to eat or go to the bathroom, I just crawled on my hands and my knees. It was absolutely terrible. But yeah, I averaged about, I think, 20 or 21 miles every day for 35 days. And I think I haven't done the exact calculation. I told everybody I did 700 miles and that was the aim. But in truth, it was probably quite a bit, not a quite a bit, but it was maybe 20 or 30 miles longer than that.
So what's going through your mind during that 2 days? Did you contemplate stopping, or was it just sort of like you needed that rest before carrying on?
The day before, when I knew, I think the interesting point for me was it took me 14 days to get to home. So the route took me through my hometown. And all during that 14 days, I was thinking, I'm going to be home in 7 days, in 6 days, in 5 days. And that kept me going, even though I was in huge amounts of pain. 2 days before I got home, I went to A&E and I was given crutches and they bandaged my feet up. And I thought, God, this might be the end. But within an hour or two, I'd abandoned the crutches and torn the most of the bandages off my feet and just kept going. But then when I had to leave home, and it took me one day to get to London, I just find it so hard. I think psychologically, I was every day then getting farther away from home. So that made it quite difficult. But when I was in London, I just ate tons of food. I wanted to get going again. There was a part of me that just really wanted to finish the whole thing, and I couldn't do that until I started going again.
And what was the response from people when you were in London?
It's funny because we didn't know how it was going to go anywhere, and we thought London's a big place. That's where we'll maybe get the biggest response. But I think the opposite was actually true. I think people in big cities, 9 million people living there, there's so much going on and they're so flooded with information that what I was doing was just like a little mote of dust in the middle of all that stuff. So in London, we had a great reception from people who knew us in advance and were waiting for me to arrive at Downing Street, where, of course, we gave a petition to Downing Street, to number 10. But other than that, I think people were a bit oblivious as to what I was doing. And when I was actually bedded down, I just stayed inside and tried to move as little as possible. So no one really saw me.
No, not at all. Yeah, it's interesting. It's a city mentality, I suppose. But what I was thinking is sort of, when you're in those couple of days when your feet are resting up, were people that have been following your journey, what was their response? Were people kind of like trying to get you up and going again?
You know, all the way through, once people realized that I was I was medically sort of in bad shape and my feet were torn up and stuff like that. People kept saying, Chris, you need to put shoes on. Every day we get dozens and dozens of messages via Facebook and Instagram saying, there's no shame in it. People will still donate if you put your shoes on. You can give up now. You've already done so well. Um, And there was another band of people who were encouraging as well and trying to get me to go. But we knew that, although people say we'll still donate, people donated because they knew we were suffering as a family. People, and it's true for all of us, I think, when they see you're in a dark place and you really need help and you're sad, people are emotionally captured by that. You connect with them emotionally and they want to help you. But if you're smiling and laughing and having a good time, people don't feel the need to donate. So, yeah, we knew, regardless of what people said, that we had to keep going and we had to complete the journey. And there was part of me that was never going to stop. I would have just kept going forever until we raised the money we needed.
Well, essentially, it's they're making that connection to the suffering, and I think the fact that people are telling you to put shoes on, although it's terrible, it's almost brilliant at the same time. It's almost like pay me to put my shoes back on. This is how much it means to me.
Yeah, I mean, there's sort of a perverse way of looking at it, which is to say that people will only pay if you're hurting yourself. It almost looks like sadism, but that wasn't it. I think just when you're in pain and you're suffering, or you're in a dark place because your daughter is sick or whatever it is, if people can really feel that, people really want to help. For us, it was always about making that emotional connection, and I think people did. If people were parents, if they had kids the same age as Hasti, who was 8 at that time, they just thought, Jesus, what if that was me? I would really hope that someone would help me. And then they would want to help and they'd make a donation. So, I think in the information age, it's easy to think that, if you just write a post or you post a little video, that people will suddenly, put their hand in their pocket and want to help. But it's not. It's still about that human connection and people, being able to feel what you're feeling.
Well, yeah, I guess with everything kind of online, it's what you're doing was so real, and people actually seeing you outside their door, like, whoa, who's that guy with no shoes on? I mean, so you're coming through this, and you get through London. What was the last stretch like, and what was the finish like?
The stretch from London to Catterick was sort of the next big milestone for me. I think that was another 13 days. So it took me 2 weeks to get sort of right up to the north of England. And I felt stronger in the second half. I think my feet started to get better. My body had adjusted to the tempo, and I had sort of found my stride. I had never, ever done anything barefoot before this challenge, ever. So I was totally unprepared. And for the first 2 weeks, I kept cursing myself. I was like, walk straight, because I had this sort of funny walk. My body was getting used to actually being barefoot. And of course, you walk differently in shoes than you do in barefoot. So for the second part of the journey from London upwards, I felt like I'd hit my stride. I felt healthier. I had more energy. My feet were recovering in a fashion. So I was really looking forward to getting to Catterick, because Catterick, of course, is a huge garrison town. So basically, the garrison there is the only reason Catterick is on the map at all. Otherwise, it would just be a village. And I hadn't anticipated what it was going to be like at all. But when I got to Catterick, the reception was, immense. There were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there. The army brought out a brass band, which they had stood in the centre of a big grass roundabout in front of the infantry training centre there. And then they took us inside, myself and the family, which was cool. And we had like a cookery demonstration from the Gurkha recruits who were going through training there. And that was really brilliant. So that was a really great part of the journey. And then from there was obviously the last week into Edinburgh. And some of my longest days were there. So the leg from Newcastle to Otterburn was over 30 miles, which was completely epic, but all completely worth it, because the final stretch into Edinburgh, 26 miles on the final day, on a really warm day, uh, was really, really good. Although I thought it was going to be awesome and I'd enjoy every minute of it, I was also just anxious to get finished and see the family, and just finally go home, having been on the road for over a month and sort of living out of my day sack.
So were you in the tent the whole time, or did you mix it up a bit?
So we had planned, my wife and I had planned that I would carry a tent and sleep in the tent, and the idea was just to not spend any money on hotels. You know, if I stayed in a hotel every night, it would have cost me, £2,000 for the whole journey. And of course, we were trying to put every penny against the fundraising. But lots and lots of people were really generous and offered us places to stay. So I did stay in the tent quite a few nights, but then people also put me up in their homes, in their camper vans, in their gardens, and all kinds of stuff. So I did get to mix it up a bit, which was good. And being able to sleep in a bed, after walking about all night is definitely welcome, because my little tent, the same as your tent when you cycled across the country, was a little one man coffin. There's no room to move at all.
I mean, I know what it's like. You wake up and you bash your bash your head as every time you're turning around. It's a terrible thing. Um, so you've come through. You've gone through 35 days on the road, all this pain in Edinburgh. And obviously, the actual bit I joined and the bit I'd seen was actually the last video. It's sort of that heartbreaking video when you finally sort of have Hasti in your arms. Is what kind of thought process are you going through? I know people see and idolize people that do these amazing things, but I see you now, I know you more as a a regular guy. I mean, obviously with an amazing thing that you've done, but what kind of goes through your head when all these people are there and you finally come to the end of this epic adventure?
You know, Seeing sort of people waiting for me at the side of the road or in towns when I finished on any given day, for me was always a really surreal experience, because I've never had anything like that in my whole life. But it was also really heartwarming to know that people care enough to come out and stand around for an hour or two just to wait to see you finish the day. So that was really amazing. And getting into Edinburgh, there were on the Royal Mile, there must have been two or three hundred people who were stood about waiting for me to come in, which was amazing to see. But really, the special thing was seeing my family. Stood in the center of the road, waiting for me to come around that final corner, and I think seeing Hasti was incredible, because Hasti and I are really close. We spend every day together. We do lots of things together every day. We do speech therapy together. We play together. We get ready for school. All those normal things. And I had missed out on all that for over a month. And of course, I had started the journey with the anxiety of having to raise these huge sums of money for her treatment. And I was relieved by the time I got to the end, because although I had sort of secretly hoped we could raise 30 or 40 grand, by the time I finished, our fundraising total had reached almost 600,000, which just blew me away. And it was great to know that my efforts weren't in vain and that we had achieved something really, really great, not only for Hasti and our family, but for everybody who has her condition, because we're hopeful that in a year's time, we're going to have the first ever gene therapy to treat her and other kids.
So I mean, we talk about this, and I think it's amazing how much you raised. But obviously, that the fight's still not over. You've still got things to push through. What sort of next on the agenda? I know sort of COVID's making it very difficult for fundraising, but have you got more ideas and things that you're working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So this year, and I don't want to give away too much, and also because in sort of classic Chris Brannigan style, nothing's really planned until the week before. But I can reveal that we have at least one world record attempt in the pipeline, maybe two. We have lots of people who volunteered to do amazing things for us. I think there's going to be a bit more barefooting around the UK, and our flagship event, which will hopefully come in the summer, lockdown and COVID dependent, will be as big as we can possibly make it, because this year we're really hopeful we can raise £1 million, which will pay for clinical trials, which is where we'll actually give this medicine to the kids that need it the most.
So I think it's a good thing, and I think once we get through that little bump, hopefully we start coming and dropping through the tears. We can really push the fundraising. I mean, is there any hopes of you heading out barefooting again?
Sadly, yes. uh, because I would really rather not do it. I can't say I enjoyed it that much. It was genuinely painful all the time. But I think it probably will happen again this year. And I think the key will be that this year I won't do it alone. I'll be inviting people to come along. They will not be coming along barefoot. Hopefully, I wouldn't like to see anybody do it, but have lots of people come along and talk about their own rare disease journeys and what they're doing, because we're not alone in this. There are so many families across the UK that are dealing with rare disease. In fact, there are 3.5 million people in the UK who have a rare disease. That's 1 in every 17 people. So you might not know it, but you probably know quite a few people who have a rare condition. And we're going to be inviting some of those people to come along and take part and help raise awareness.
Well, I'll definitely be joining if you can. I'll join you barefoot for sure. So I'm probably going to come to the end of the podcast now. I just want to give you the opportunity to tell people where they can help out and where they can find all the details about the charity.
Absolutely. So if people want to check in on what we've done and what we're going to be doing, they can just Google Hope for Hasti, which is spelled Hasti, and they'll find our Instagram page where we update fairly regularly, our Facebook page, and they'll probably also find hopeforhasti.org, our website, where they can also find lots more information on our journey and what we're trying to do for children with CDLS.
Thank you for coming on, and to anyone listening at home, please join us on a barefoot run. I've done one, and it was a lot of fun. Terrible, it really does hurt the feet, but this is a charity that means a lot to me. I've grown a fondness for them, and hopefully we'll be doing something of my own this year. Thank you, Chris. It's been lovely to actually have you on the podcast and learn a bit more about the journey.
Cheers. Thanks for having me, Josh.
See you later. Bye bye.